Welcome back. In this video, we're going to take our inked outlines and we're going to add black fills. So in the previous video, I talked about the idea of line weight, line confidence, and basically establishing your forms and how to alter your pencils in order to ink more effectively. So in this video, we'll talk about black fills. Now, I'm of the opinion that when you're inking, you want to make sure that your drawing stands alone without having to resort to colors to get, to get it to look good. So I've got all my outlines in, and what I'll do is I'll just hide my pencils layer, and I'll make a new layer right above my pencils layer. So I've got everything isolated into 3 separate layers. In fact, I've got the car here. I'll just label this, double click, car. I'll call this one chair. Actually, I've got 4 layers. I've got Howard, and I've got She-Hulk. Now, at this stage, if I want to manipulate things or move things around, I have the freedom to do that. Maybe what I'd like to do is I'd like to merge the chair and Howard together. I can hit Command E, and I'll just say, double click, Howard, right? So I've got everything set up. So I've got 3 basic layers. I've got a layer underneath, and this is where I'm going to add my black fills. The black fills are those areas that are going to be fully covered within black. I typically like to work on the layer that's underneath the outlines because then I can manipulate the black fills. If I don't like them, I can get rid of them and I'm not touching the original line art. But that's entirely up to you. Some artists will actually put their black fills on the same layer as their other inks. If you were doing this traditionally, your black fills would be on the same, there's no layers, it would basically be where you ink. So it's really up to you as far as how you want to approach this. Everyone's got a different way of doing it. I'm just going to share my approach with you and my rationale. So the next thing I want to do is I want to add my black fills. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all hit the W key and make sure that I've got the magic wand tool active, number 1. The second thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that the following menu options up above here are checked: anti-alias, contiguous, and sample all layers. So the magic wand is a selection tool, and what we're telling it to do is anti-alias means to try to fill in those areas. Like when you're looking at a raster-based object, there's going to be certain parts of the object, like if I zoom in, that are going to not be purely black. Like if I really zoom in, you're going to see that there's some parts here that are light gray and medium gray. So anti-alias is allowing you to, when you're making your selection, it allows you to consider the fact that you want to select those gray areas as well. And then contiguous and sample all layers, basically this means that if I'm working on a new layer, it is going to honor the items that are on other layers, which is what you want. And then tolerance, this tolerance, I like to set this number up to say something like 60 or 70, something like that. I'd set it to a fairly high value because it makes the selection more coarse. It fills in more of those areas where you have some gray values in your inks. So generally the higher the tolerance, the more coarse the selection, the lower the tolerance. If your tolerance is at 1, it will be very strict and pick only the areas that are pure white. And what that will end up doing is it gives you a lot of little white fuzzy areas in your when you add your colors and you add your black fills. So these are the settings that I use here. Before I go ahead and start inking, I just want to just double check and make sure that I've closed all my gaps. I can see that there's a gap here that I haven't closed, and there's a few here and there. I'm not the best in terms of recognizing when all the gaps are open. Sometimes I'll just work and I'll realize as I'm working that, oh no, I forgot to close a gap. And it's not a big deal, but it just makes things easier when you're getting around to actually adding your black fills. So let's go on our blank layer underneath our existing inks. And here's another really cool thing you can do too. If we want to recognize our inks layer really quickly, you can go underneath the eyeball and right click, and we'll just choose green for all of my inks. And this way you're kind of labeling these as your ink layers. And if you want to, furthermore, you can also shift select those layers and lock them so that you don't accidentally color or add black fills to your inks layer. So that being said, now I can use the Magic Wand tool, keyboard shortcut W, and I'll find the areas that are going to need black fills. So like here is an area that will be black, but notice that it's actually, this outline is bleeding into the cone section of the megaphone. So again, I have to go ahead and close my gap. So I'll go to the Howard layer, I'll unlock it, I'll close the gap, and then I'll go back to my other layer. I'll hit the Magic Wand tool, and I will fill this area in with black. Now, you can use your brush and you can color as much as you want, or you can just hit Option, Delete, or Alt Backspace. That fills in your color. And if you'll notice here really quick, like when I zoom in, do you see that there's a little bit of grayscale lines here? That means that there are still some areas that weren't quite fully filled in. Let's take another look at this, and let's bump up that tolerance value to something like 99. Now let's go back and hit Option Delete, and that does a better job. You can still see a little bit of grayish pixels, but it did a much more elaborate job in terms of selecting these areas. And you can always come back in with your brush and you can just color those in to get rid of those little white mark areas. It's not going to be perfect, but from this distance you really can't see it. There's a gap here for Howard's mouth. I want to close that. So I'm always going back. This is my black fills layer. I'll just call this black fills. I'll use my Magic Wand tool, Option Delete, his glasses, Option Delete or Alt Backspace, his shadow. Oh, there's a little bit of his leg that's showing there. I could also go ahead and just close it on the black fills layer, Option Delete. There's a shadow here, Option Delete. And let's take a look at the car. There are some gaps that are still open. How do I know that? Well, because I can see parts of She-Hulk's hair also being selected. So let me close this gap. Now it looks like it's just selecting the vehicle. Option Delete or Alt Backspace. And what you're noticing here is when I'm adding those black fills, what it does is it makes the drawing way more solid. It just feels like there's some, some mass to the drawings. It doesn't feel like it's just super light. So these are other areas that I want to add black fills. She-Hulk's hair and some of the shading. You can add to your selection again by holding down the Shift key. There's a gap somewhere over here, so I have to come back and fill that in. But Option Delete. Option Delete or Alt Backspace, and then I'm going to look for gaps here. There's a gap, and then use the Magic Wand tool, Option Delete. So adding black fills really makes your penciled and inked line art really pop. And I'll just finish this one out here by, there's an area here that needs to be darker. Like these back legs are going to be in shadow, like so. And so now I've added the black fills for this drawing. I'm not done yet. I still need to add some textured elements, but we've got the black fills and we've got the outlines done. In the next video, we'll look at some texturing opportunities. I'll see you then.